Imagine a world where your entire life ends before your voice even deepens, before you ever grow old enough to be called an adult. For early humans, that was reality. Many never made it past the age of 12. Childhood was not a stage of innocence, it was survival itself. But why were our ancestors trapped in such short lives? And how did humanity break free from that deadly clock? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine being born into the world 2 million years ago. You're a small child of Homo habilis, one of the earliest members of our genus. There are no houses, no fire yet to keep the night safe, and no medicine. If you fall ill, from the moment you take your first breath, the odds are stacked against you. Fossil evidence paints a sobering picture. Many of the Homo habilis remains discovered in East Africa show signs of short lifespans. Teeth studies, those tiny time capsules of ancient lives, reveal patterns of wear and stress that suggest most individuals never lived long enough to reach what we call adulthood. Anthropologists estimate that the average life expectancy hovered in the early teens, meaning children rarely had the chance to grow old. And yet, this wasn't because our ancestors were weak. Far from it, Homo habilis had already taken major evolutionary steps forward. Slightly larger brains, stone tool use, and the first hints of human-like behavior, but they were playing a survival game with rules far harsher than anything we can imagine today. Predators lurked everywhere, food was scarce, and injury or illness often meant a quick end. Childhood was not a protected phase, it was the battlefield of existence. Picture the African landscape 2 million years ago. It wasn't just a cradle of humanity, it was a hunting ground filled with predators, larger, faster, and deadlier than anything we face today. And children of Homo habilis were right in the middle of it. Giant hyenas like Pachyrhacota brevirostris roamed the plains, capable of cracking open massive bones with jaws that rival modern lions in power. For a small hominin child, they weren't scavengers, they were executioners waiting for an opportunity. Then there were the saber-toothed cats, their dagger-like, fangs perfectly designed to puncture through flesh and bone. Fossil sites suggest these predators weren't rare, they were common threats, competing with humans for food and often winning, and the water wasn't safe either. At Olduvai Gorge, evidence shows crocodiles preying on hominins, dragging them from the banks and turning them into a hominid snack. Imagine a Homo habilis, child wandering too close to a river to drink, only to be pulled under in seconds. Every step was a gamble. To survive the day, a child needed to avoid predators, find enough food, and keep pace with their group. There was no safety net, no second. Chance death by 12 wasn't an exception. It was the rule carved into the bones of our ancestors. If predators weren't enough, the very earth itself turned against early humans. Around the late Miocene and early Pleistocene, Africa's climate was in constant flux. What had once been lush forest patches gave way to expanding savannas, then swung back again in cycles of wet and dry for Homo habilis families. This meant the world could change dramatically within a single lifetime. Food scarcity was relentless. One season might bring an abundance of fruits and tubers. The next, droughts left the land barren. Dental studies of early hominins reveal heavy enamel wear, signs of chewing tough, gritty foods just to stay alive. Malnutrition was common, and when paired with injuries or infection, it became a death sentence, especially for children whose growing bodies demanded steady nourishment. And survival wasn't just about finding food, it was about keeping it. Carnivores like saber-toothed cats or giant hyenas often stole kills from humans, forcing Homo habilis to scavenge, retreat, and live on scraps. Imagine the frustration of a group finally bringing down a small antelope, only to watch a predator chase them away before they could feed their children. Life expectancy wasn't short simply because of predators, it was short because the environment offered no mercy. In a world of shifting climates, scarce resources, and endless competition, every sunrise was a small victory. When we want to understand how early humans lived and died, one of the best places to look is inside their mouths. Teeth are timekeepers. Each layer of enamel is like a ring in a tree, recording stress, diet, and even the pace of growth. For Homo habilis and their Australopithecine cousins, those records tell a brutal truth. Life was short and it was hard. Micro-wear studies show their teeth were ground down quickly, worn by diets filled with gritty plants, fibrous roots, and the occasional scraps of meat. The wear patterns reveal more than what they ate. They show how little time they had. Many individuals didn't live long enough to develop the kind of adult dental wear we see in later species. Their enamel was scarred early, hinting at children forced to chew hard foods long before they were ready. But teeth also reveal something else: growth rates. Modern humans have a long, stretched-out childhood where teeth erupt slowly. Early hominins didn't. Their dental timelines looked more like chimpanzees: rapid growth, fast maturation, and little downtime for learning or recovery. Childhood wasn't a luxury stage of life. It was rushed, compressed, and dangerous. For Homo habilis, growing up too fast wasn't a choice. It was the only way to survive, even if it meant dying young. If teeth reveal the pace of growing up, brains reveal the cost of rushing through it. Homo habilis had brains averaging around 600 to 700 cubic centimeters, larger than Australopithecus, but still only about half the size of our own. This modest expansion marked the beginning of encephalization, the trend toward larger, more complex brains that would eventually define humanity. But here's the problem: bigger brains come at a price. They require longer development, more energy and more time for learning. Yet in Homo habilis, that process was still caught in a tug-of-war. Their brains were growing, but their childhoods were short. Fossil endocasts even suggest the presence of a primitive Broca's area, hinting at early neural structures for communication. But how much could they really learn if most didn't live beyond 12? Compare that to modern humans. Our long childhood gives us years to absorb language, social rules, and survival skills. For early Homo, the clock ticked faster. A child had to master foraging, tool use, and predator awareness in just a handful of years. Mistakes weren't teaching moments. They were often fatal. This tension between a brain demanding more time and a life that allowed so little is at the heart of why early human existence was so fragile. For Homo habilis, speed was survival. Growing up fast meant reaching physical maturity before predators or disease claimed you. A child who matured quickly could walk farther with the group, handle tools, and maybe even help forage before their fragile years were over. In a world filled with saber-toothed cats and giant hyenas, waiting around to grow slowly wasn't an option. But there was a cost. Rapid childhood left little room for the deep learning that modern humans rely on. A compressed life history meant skills had to be picked up quickly, often through trial and error, and mistakes could be deadly. Compare this to later humans like Homo erectus, who began to stretch childhood longer. That extra time opened the door to greater cooperation, more sophisticated tools, and cultural traditions passed from one generation to the next. It's a trade-off written into our evolution: mature fast and survive now, or grow slow and invest in the future. For Homo habilis, the environment forced the first option, locking them into short, frantic lives. But evolution never stands still. The seeds of something new, larger brains, social bonds, tool-making, were already planted. Humanity just hadn't yet figured out how to buy itself more time. Imagine being a child in a Homo habilis group, your entire life a race against time. Now fast forward a few 100,000 years to Homo erectus. Something has shifted. Childhood is beginning to stretch, survival is slowly improving, and the curse of dying young is starting to weaken. The reason? Cooperation. Early humans discovered that survival was no longer just about the individual, it was about the group. Shared food meant children didn't have to rely only on what they could forage themselves. A kill could be distributed, and mothers didn't have to carry the burden of feeding alone. For the first time, humanity created a safety net. Then came fire with fire. Nights became safer, meals became easier to chew and digest, and communities could gather in ways no species had before. Cooked food didn't just fill bellies, it freed up energy for brain growth and gave fragile young bodies a better chance to survive beyond adolescence. These changes didn't erase the dangers, but they tilted the odds. The leap from Homo habilis to Homo erectus marks the first real step toward lifespans that could stretch past 12. It was here that humanity learned, to survive, we had to survive together. Why did humanity start to live longer? The answer lies in something counterintuitive, slowing down childhood. For millions of years, hominins rushed to adulthood. But with Homo erectus and later species, evolution began experimenting with a different strategy, stretching childhood into a long, protected phase. This wasn't just biology, it was survival genius. A longer childhood gave time to learn tool-making wasn't intuitive. It had to be practiced, copied, and perfected. Hunting strategies, foraging knowledge, even the ability to recognize safe plants, all required years of observation and teaching without time. None of that could pass from one generation to the next. And here's the irony. While children were physically vulnerable for longer, their communities compensated by protecting and feeding them. That meant survival wasn't based on growing up fast anymore. It was based on learning deeply. Childhood transformed from a liability into humanity's greatest weapon. The expansion of brain size only made this more important. With bigger brains came more capacity for language, memory and planning, but those abilities needed years of practice to blossom. Instead of racing to live before 12, humans now began investing in lifespans that stretched into decades, and with every added year of learning, our ancestors carved out an advantage no predator could match. The story of humanity is in many ways the story of time. For Homo habilis, time was a cruel master. Most lives ended before adolescence. But as fire, cooperation, and culture grew, humanity found ways to buy itself more of it. By the time of Homo erectus, lifespans were stretching. By the age of Homo sapiens, humans could live long enough to become grandparents, a revolutionary shift. Why does that matter? Because grandparents became teachers. Older generations carried memories of droughts, hunting techniques, plant medicines, and survival strategies. For the first time, knowledge didn't die with the young. It accumulated, creating culture and tradition. That was the true escape from the curse of 12 years. Predators still prowled, diseases still struck. But humanity had changed the rules. Childhood was no longer just a fragile sprint. It was the foundation of who we are. Each year gained meant more learning, more innovation, more resilience today. When we think of childhood, we imagine school, play, and growth. But buried deep in our evolutionary memory is the reminder that for millions of years, children never made it that far. The fact that you can grow up, dream, and even grow old is not guaranteed by nature. It's humanity's greatest invention. For most of human history, life wasn't measured in decades, it was measured in desperate years. Fossils of Homo habilis remind us that 12 might have been the finish line, not the starting point of adulthood. Predators, disease, starvation, and an unforgiving climate made childhood a fragile, fleeting stage. And yet from that fragility came resilience. Our ancestors didn't just survive, they adapted. They built safety in numbers, stretched the gift of time through cooperation, and turned childhood into a powerful tool for learning. In doing so, they rewrote the rules of evolution itself. What was once a world where children rarely saw adulthood became a species where grandparents became teachers, storytellers, and guardians of memory. Every year we live today is borrowed from those who came before, who fought for each sunrise, who endured knowing that tomorrow was never promised. Their struggle bought us the extraordinary luxury of growing old. So the next time you see a child playing, laughing and dreaming of the future, remember, that freedom is the rarest gift of all, forged in a world where children once died at 12. If this journey through our past moved you, share it with someone who loves history. Subscribe for more deep dives into humanity's untold stories, and let's keep exploring how fragile beginnings shape the world we live in today.